So, would you like me to talk for a minute, or you want to start off with questions, or what do you feel more comfortable with?
I think we're gonna start off with a couple questions.
Okay?
So our History Day project is about a case that was taken to the Supreme Court called Plessy versus Ferguson.
Okay.
So our agenda was to get as many live sources as possible to get their take on the case and things like that.
Okay.
So we each prepared a couple of questions to ask you.
Okay.
Mine is, I'm sure that you're aware of the racial tensions that were going on during that time era. It was quite obvious that the judges, senators, and many politicians from the southern states were oblivious and knowing that they were ruining the lives of minorities. Do you think that this cycle is repeating itself, particularly with the President of the United States?
Oh, I didn't realize I was going to have to answer that. The jury's still out on that, I think. I don't think he's helped any with his travel ban and things like that, and his combative attitude. I saw on the news today where he was accusing Obama of bugging his phone lines in the Trump Tower after he was elected, before he was sworn in. So I certainly don't think he's helped any.
Okay. Do you think that he's comprehensive with the Constitution?
No, I do not. At least the way it has been interpreted by our Supreme Court. I think he has some issues with the Supreme Court and their interpretation of some things.
Joycelyn?
What would you do if you were in Judge Ferguson's place?
Well, you have to look at the time. I mean, we're talking about 1894 and the social pressures that were involved in. And by that, I mean, you guys all know about slavery, and it was abolished by the 13th Amendment. And after that, the southern states started passing Jim Crow laws. Are you all familiar with those?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And so you had all of the, southern states that were passing these laws, and they were kind of the norm then. I mean, they were trying to continue slavery, in my opinion, in a way. I know everybody was free, but, they had poll taxes and all the stuff for the blacks to go to, the whites to go to, whether it be trains or water fountains or bathrooms or anything. And so the sentiment of the country in the South at the time is they didn't want the two races to be together. So he was an elected judge. And so I think he had a tremendous amount of pressure on him to uphold the separate but equal.
Do you think that the separate but equal was applied correctly? Like, do you think they were separate, but do you think they were really equal?
No. And I was telling Nikki, I can even remember, I'll show my age a little bit, but I can even remember there was a store downtown called Cress's, and it was kind of down by Ruth Kelly. And when I was a little kid, I still remember, even here in Oklahoma, where the white people could sit at the bar and order what they wanted to, and the black people had to sit over against the wall back in the corner, and they didn't have good service, and so no, I don't think it was. And I've seen pictures. I was watching a bunch of stuff. I like history about JFK, and they've had a bunch of documentaries on about him, and they were showing the bathrooms, for example, whites only, blacks only, and water fountains, and like the ones for the blacks were bad, and the ones for the whites weren't. That was the same way with trains, and later on buses as well, things like that. I guess there weren't really airplanes involved too much then, but they'd have been the same way.
I just asked, all right. What are your thoughts on the 13th and 14th amendments, and like, how do you think they affected the ruling of the case?
Of Plessy and Ferguson? Well, they obviously didn't affect the ruling very much because that judge interpreted separate but equal to provide due process under the 14th Amendment. As long, I think his basic, and I didn't read the whole case, but as I understand it, his basic premise was that as long as there were facilities available for everyone, that met the due process clause, whether they were good or bad. I mean, I still remember when Sadler was manual training. Y'all heard about that. And, you know, the interesting thing about that is, I don't know, did you all ever know a lady named Elnora Wright? She died not very long ago, but she worked at the hospital. She was a really nice black lady. We've got to be really good friends. She joked that I couldn't make ribs, so I made her some ribs and took over to her, and she used to bring cakes down to the office and everything. But as far as schools went here in Muskogee at the time, she said that neither the whites nor the blacks wanted integration, and that it was a really bad deal for a while when the schools were integrated, because a lot of the black teachers who were so good didn't get hired, and some of the white or whatever other didn't take as much of an interest in the black students. So she thought that really hurt the blacks by taking away their schools. Even though it wasn't as nice, they had a whole bunch of, according to her, really dedicated teachers. And that kind of went away when they integrated in 70 or thereabouts, something like that. That answer your question? I kind of rambled a little bit.
It does.
Do you think Homer Plessy influenced Rosa Parks in any way?
Yeah, I think that I'm trying to think, was Rosa Parks was before the Civil Rights Act of '64, so yeah, I think that those things, like what Rosa did, and I'm sure there are others that I can't remember off the top of my head, started to change the sentiment in the South as well as other places that it's not right to have separate, so-called separate but equal, because they weren't, because blacks had to sit in the back of the bus and the whites had to sit in front of the bus, or they had their own car or whatever. And I think that had a big influence on it, along with Dr. King too. Yeah.
Thank you.
How would you defend yourself if you were Homer Plessy?
Well, I think he did the right thing. He bought a ticket. He said he wanted to sit somewhere. They wouldn't let him sit somewhere. He went all the way up through the legal system. I think he was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. As I recall reading that last night, he followed the law. When the Supreme Court ruled that a separate but equal was constitutional, he went back to the judge fined him $25 and he paid it. I mean, you just kind of have to work with the law and how the Supreme Court interprets it at the time. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I don't agree with that the Supreme Court does now, but I mean, they're the law until it's changed. You have to follow it. So I think he did the right thing. Certainly challenging it, I think he did the right thing.
Do you agree with the ruling of the case and why?
No, I don't agree with it. And as evidence that I'm right, when Brown versus Board of Education went before the Supreme Court, it was 9-0 unanimous decision that separate but equal was unconstitutional.
Well, it's quite clear that systematic racism played a role in this case. You still think that's a problem facing our country?
Obviously it is, but I don't think, coming from a white guy, I'm a traffic court judge, and I've been judge down there for 15 years. I treat everybody the same. So, as far as the part that I can control, it's not a problem. Do I think it's a problem? Yeah, I think it probably still is. I do. I think compared to when I was a kid, because I'm 56, I think things have gotten a lot better. I think your all's generation is gonna make a big change, because I think you all understand the way it's supposed to be. And so I think it changes with every generation. I mean, my grandmother was terrible. She was from Virginia. And some of the things that she said, I mean, I remember my dad just being so upset. He was mayor here for 6 or 7 years back in the 70s. And I know he worked real hard to hire more black police officers, hire minority employees in the city. That's one thing I noticed looking at all those JFK documentaries. All the people who were police officers, detectives, I mean, anybody who was anybody, they were all white men. If you get a chance to look at those, look at them, and you won't see a woman, you won't see a Hispanic, you won't see a black. Any of those police departments and all those people that were investigating that, everybody they interviewed were white men with horn-rimmed glasses on. I just thought it was funny that they all had horn-rimmed glasses on, but anyway. So, but I think it's important for you all to see that while it may be slow, that our Supreme Court generally does the right thing, and they look at the situation now and try to be proactive in promoting due process and equality with everybody. Like President, they struck down that travel ban. I mean, that didn't take any time. And that was obviously not something that he had the authority to do, I don't think. I mean, he could be more specific, and if there's somebody that's really a threat, but just a general ban on a whole class of people, that's not gonna work.
So, like, if you were Judge Ferguson, would you have ruled the same thing just because of the social pressure and, like, kind of the time error, or would you have, like, not ruled the same thing?
Gotta put myself back in the 1890s. That was something that was so accepted at the time by a majority of the people. I don't know, I like to think I would have ruled the other way, but I don't know, I may not have. It was a whole different time back then. And, today it's a no-brainer, which is a good deal.
Do you respect what Homer Plessy did? If so, why?
Well, kind of like I said a minute ago, yeah. I mean, he was going about trying to effect change in a peaceful way. And he didn't pull a gun on anybody, he didn't threaten anybody, but he followed and went through the Louisiana, I think, wasn't it Louisiana? Anyway, whichever state he was in, he went through their courts, and then he went to the Supreme Court, which is what he should have done. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court wasn't right there yet.
Do you think Plessy was treated fairly in this situation?
As I look at it today, no. I do not.
When you say, if you look at it today, do you mean like in the past, you would have had a different answer?
I think you have to understand what the situation was at the time. What was your question again?
Well, you said, if I look at it today,
Yeah.
no. So are you saying that if you were perhaps in like the 1890s, you would have a different answer?
Possibly. I don't know. That's kind of a loaded question. But, because I don't know. I wasn't around then. I don't know what the pressures were and stuff. But that was kind of the accepted norm at the time, you know? That's what's so good about our country is we can kind of evolve and change when people see things that aren't right. You can demonstrate, you can elect new judges, you can elect new legislators who appoint the judges, and you can make change that way. And that's what happened with the Civil Rights Act in '64, is Kennedy and Johnson ran on that they were gonna pass it. And that was the time when Martin Luther King and Coretta and all them were doing their peaceful protests, and I think it made people really see that, yeah, this is not right. So,
Any more questions? Thank you.
have I helped any?
Yes.
Okay. It was an interesting deal, and, you know, I hadn't read those two cases since law school, and I read them last night, or Saturday sometime. And the difference in the opinions in Plessy and Ferguson and Brown v. Board of Education, if you haven't read those opinions, they're not real long, or you can get on Wikipedia or whatever, they can give you a summary of it. I mean, it's amazing that the first time it was 7-1,
Yeah.
and the next time it was 9-0. So I think that shows that even the judiciary can be sensitive to what's right and wrong as times change. So, but I'd encourage you to read those. I didn't know this either. The Brown case actually went up 3 times to the Supreme Court. There's the original decision that was 9-0, and then they went back for some other issues to implement it. And then they went back in the 70s because there was a question as to whether magnet schools were a de facto separate but equal deal. And that time they said magnet schools were okay as long as they were colorblind, basically, is what they said. But those are interesting opinions. If you're interested in some history to see how things change, those 4, the first one, Plessy, and then those 3 Brown opinions are really interesting to read. Okay, so what is this for? What are you guys doing?
History Day.
Okay,
We're making a website,
okay.
and we're required to have primary and secondary sources and things like this.
Uh-huh.
And no other groups came up with this idea, and we had the idea to do a live source.
So
Cool.
we're recording it so that we can put the videos on our website.
Uh-huh.
And we've interviewed other judges, so we're kind of gonna like put them together
Uh-huh.
so that we can have it for our website, because we figure like the more live sources will kind of help us score higher at History Day.
Yeah, that's good. What other judges have you talked with?
We talked to Norman Thigeson.
Yeah.
And then we've been contacting more people. We're just trying to get as many interviews as possible.
Yeah.
Like, we emailed the governor's chief of staff and things
Uh-huh.
like that.
Nice.
Yeah. Have you tried to contact Justice Edmondson? You might try to contact him. He's pretty good about talking to people. He's on the Supreme Court in
What's
Oklahoma
his name
City.
again?
Jim Edmondson. He is very insightful.
Yes, he is.
I don't hold the candle to him. He's very insightful as to stuff, and he might really be able to give you some good information, but you probably have to go to Oklahoma City for that. So, anyway.
Thank you.
You.
Well, okay.
You guys.
Nice to meet all of you.
You too.
Do you mind taking a picture with us for our website?
No, that's fine.